to Discograffiti, the deep dive podcast for music obsessives that gives maniacs like you and me the chance to connect with a brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebroe, and when I was a kid, I thought I loved music. But no, that was only the beginning. I almost lost my life, and in the process, it made music a top priority in a way I'd thought was completely unimaginable. I quit my job, went all in on Discograffiti, and never looked back. And so, with 3 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about, or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on love! Along with our special guest, Johnny Echols. This episode is part of a series called 7 and 7 and 7 is, the definitive 21-episode story of Arthur Lee and Love, which I've consciously crafted to act as the ultimate repository of fact and opinion on one of the greatest bands to ever walk the face of the earth, the almighty Love. It includes 13 episodes heralding the return of Discograffiti host OG Joe Kennedy, 6 episodes from a 4.5-hour interview with OG Love mainstay Johnny Echols, and 2 episodes from a 2.5-hour interview with the members of Baby Lemonade, who've served as Love now for coming up on 35 years. This is part 4, the second part of my interview with Johnny, which covers the same time period as episode 3, but in more granular detail and heard directly from the man who lived it. Part 4 covers Love's self-titled debut Elektra LP, the machinations behind the scenes, the making of the record, and all the classic music on it. Here are just a few of the many things that Johnny discusses with Discograffiti in this podcast. The meanings behind some of the cryptic lyrics of 7 and 7 is, and how the song metamorphosized once Johnny got his hands on it. The only song in Love Mark I history on which Arthur played guitar. The amount of material that Johnny says he wrote on the debut for which he did not receive credit. Johnny's theory as to why Arthur drove himself into the depths of drug addiction without ever letting up. Jack Holtzman's process of singling Arthur out for recognition from the rest of Love and how that impacted the group. What day-to-day life was like in the castle, and an in-depth deep dive with Johnny on the debut LP Love, plus his own star rating on the record. And away we go then! No one who talks about you guys is ever dismissive about you, but they are dismissive about everyone else. People would say things like, Love is basically Arthur, and Johnny. They would always include you to a man. It would always be, there would be mention of you, but never really Love as a unit, which you're telling me the band, or at least the 3 of you, would create those arrangements, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a band. These were kind of, I always say this, is 4 uniquely talented individuals who were never told what or how to play, but, given the freedom to play. And that's basically what we were. Arthur knew, he could see the writing on the wall, so to speak. He knew what was happening. He knew how these songs were created.
Should you have had credit on all of the songs on that record?
All of us should have gotten credit. That was the thing that we had discussed with Jim. We talked about it before hooking them up with Elektra. And I said, man, whatever you do, man, if just one of the guys writes a song and somebody else adds, whatever, a couple of chords to it, give everybody writers credit, because everybody, you're in a group and you guys create this music together. All groups are like that. Rarely, maybe Creedence Clearwater, you'd have one guy and he's able to do all of that. But in most groups, whoever comes up with an idea of the song, everybody else puts their part into it and makes that idea into a song. And so they did that, and they ended up being very wealthy and very successful and having few problems with each other by just the songs. Everything is written by the Doors collectively rather than singling somebody out individually. Even though Robbie wrote Light My Fire, all of them get credit for Light My Fire. So That was basically from our conversation doing that, because I could see this is tearing this group. It tore the Byrds apart. This is one of the things that tears groups apart, is record companies singling out about one individual, and that individual is getting recognition and also more money. And the group is a group. They didn't sign a solo artist. They signed a group, and they should allow that group to proceed as a group. But they were so accustomed to doing that, having one person set aside, and that person is the leader, or that person is the one that gets all of the attention. Once you start doing that, you're just signing the death knell for that group, because they're going to break up. They'd have to, because when one person is getting more attention and more money, and everybody in the group knows that this person does not deserve, that person himself, truth be told, the reason Arthur died is because he felt and thought of himself as a fraud, that he wasn't who everyone thought he was. And so he continued using drugs long after, I stopped using drugs in the 70s. Arthur was using drugs up until and when he was in the hospital dying of leukemia. And crack cocaine was his addiction. Toluene is a substance that is used as a cut. In it, it's like you need a solvent to create it, to separate the base, the free base. So you're freeing the base, which is the cocaine itself, and you're freeing it from the adulterants. And they use toluene or benzene, and the Mexican crack cocaine that came to this country was cut or used benzene as part of the creative process of creating that drug, the solvent. Benzene is absolutely 1000% the cause of leukemia. So many people that were in our circle, from John Fleckenstein, John Sterlingson, many groups, Mel Van, I can name about 25 people that were in our circle who died from leukemia and were using crack cocaine. Unfortunately, I never used crack cocaine because I'm not a flamboyant person who wants to, to be out of himself. I want to be nodding off over in the corner. So
yeah, I was an opiate guy.
That's me. I was a heroin guy. I don't run away from who I was. I used heroin for a couple of years. And
I thought it was 6 months.
No, I ended over time. It was a couple of years. I used it probably for about 5 to 6 months, and then I stopped, and then I went back. I never got addicted after that, but I still used heroin over a period, I guess, of maybe 18 months to 2 years before I stopped altogether and never ever touched it again. Yeah. But, as I said, Arthur liked the upper and I liked the downer. So the reason he died is because of crack cocaine, and he used crack cocaine long after everyone else had grown out of the drug phase. It's because he was trying to live up to something that he did not have the requisites to live up to. He just didn't have it.
Amazingly, it all can be reduced down to these 4 days in the studio when you guys kicked off your career, your recording career as Love. Something that just hit me that I'd never thought of before, this idea of Jack Holtzman courting one person from a band. This is a label that before you had strolled in through the front door. In folk, there's only one person at a time. Right. There's no folk bands. Folk rock was just starting. So, you had Tom Rush or Judy Collins. It's one person. So he probably didn't have the know-how, Jack Holtzman, to be able to balance that attention out toward a band and realize that you're actually dissolving the fundamental nature of what it is that you signed in the first place by just directing your attention to Arthur.
Yeah, but see, at that point, the whole industry was geared toward the solo artist. Before that, before the Beatles, there were the Frankie Avalons, the Fabians, and Johnny Mathis, always a single artist. And so the record company, the management, they're all, accustomed to dealing with that one individual. So basically, he continued that practice. And when you're working with a group, even the Beatles, when you start doing that and working with a group of individuals rather than one, you end up playing them off against each other, and you're going to have conflict and problems. So rather than accepting a group, you signed a group, talk to the group, relate to the group as a group rather than trying to single out one individual. Because when you do that, it's just asking for problems. From the Eagles, the Beatles, everybody you can think of, the Byrds, they ended up breaking off basically because Gene Clark was getting the attention and the money, because they're pulling, even though Jim McGuinn or Roger McGuinn was basically the person who initiated the formation of the group, because I guess it was easier for them to talk to, or they find one person that they feel that they can relate to better, and that's what they do.
Yeah, it's poison. What are your lasting images from those 4 days, those crazy 4 days of recording your self-titled debut? All right, that concludes your free sneak peek into today's bonus episode. If you want to hear the rest of it, just visit patreon.com/discograffiti and either purchase this podcast by itself for $4, or better yet, subscribe at the major tier and get access to Discograffiti's 3 weekly episodes. That's Friday's main episode, the Sunday Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's our podcast within a podcast featuring Patreon members as guests, and your Tuesday bonus episode. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 7-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/discograffiti.